Imagine this. You're an inmate, trapped in a system where you rely entirely on the prison for your most basic needs. One day, you're working your usual prison job when suddenly, your back snaps under the weight of a massive cotton bale. You know something is wrong, but you're stuck in a place where nobody listens to you. And even worse, nobody seems to care. This was J.W. Gamble's reality. In 1973, Gamble, an inmate in the Texas Department of Corrections, suffered a severe back injury while on a prison work assignment. He went to the prison hospital, hoping for relief, but instead of compassionate care, he got painkillers and was sent back to his cell. No proper diagnosis, no real treatment, just pills to keep him quiet. Over the next few months, Gamble's condition worsened. He begged for help, but each time he returned to the hospital, he was sent away with little more than a new bottle of pills. Now imagine, you're in agonizing pain, and your cries for help go ignored. What do you do when the system that's supposed to care for you is the very one causing your suffering? When Gamble told prison staff he couldn't work because of the pain, they didn't believe him. Instead of giving him the rest and treatment he desperately needed, they punished him. Solitary confinement. For not working, for refusing to do what his broken body physically couldn't handle. Can you imagine the torment of being locked away, completely isolated, with no one to turn to and no one willing to listen? What's worse, the medical team didn't just fail him, they denied him. After months of trying to get help, a doctor finally told the prison that Gamble was in first-class condition, even though Gamble's back pain and high blood pressure were still crippling him. And when he collapsed with chest pains, desperate for help, he was left waiting 12 hours to see a doctor. 12 hours. Imagine that. This wasn't just neglect. This was something far worse. This was deliberate indifference. Gamble's ordeal wasn't just about his back pain. It was about a prison system that treated human suffering like an inconvenience. And when Gamble filed a lawsuit, he wasn't just fighting for his own survival. He was fighting for the rights of every single inmate who's ever been silenced by neglect and cruelty. He sued under 42 U.S.C. 1983, a law meant to protect individuals from violations of their constitutional rights. Gamble argued that the prison's failure to properly treat his medical needs was nothing short of cruel and unusual punishment, a clear violation of the Eighth Amendment. But when the case first reached the courts, his cries for help were once again dismissed. The lower courts threw out his case, claiming that the prison's actions didn't amount to a violation of his rights. Think about that for a moment. You're in pain. You're being neglected. You're being punished for not working through an injury. And when you try to fight back, they tell you that what you've gone through doesn't matter. But Gamble didn't stop there. His case made it all the way to the Supreme Court, where the justices had to answer one question. When does neglect in prison become cruel and unusual punishment? And here's where the story takes a twist. The Supreme Court sided with Gamble, at least in part. They ruled that prisoners do have a right to proper medical care, and that deliberate indifference to an inmate's serious medical needs does violate the Eighth Amendment. This was a victory, not just for Gamble, but for inmates across the country. But here's the thing. Justice wasn't fully served. While the court acknowledged that deliberate indifference could violate the Constitution, they dismissed Gamble's claims against the medical director, saying that the treatment he received was just negligence, not a constitutional violation. Negligence, but not enough to matter. Gamble's struggle was acknowledged, but it wasn't enough to give him the justice he deserved. In a powerful dissent, Justice Stevens called out the court's failure to give Gamble's case the weight it deserved. He argued that the court wasn't listening, just like the prison system hadn't listened. Stevens pointed out something vital. It didn't matter whether the prison doctors intended to harm Gamble. What mattered was the suffering they caused through their neglect. Intent should never excuse injustice. So here's the heart of the story. J.W. Gamble wasn't just a prisoner. He was a human being whose pain was ignored, whose rights were trampled on by the very system meant to protect him. And even though the Supreme Court made strides in defining what cruel and unusual punishment means for medical care in prisons, the ruling was far from perfect. It left gaps loopholes, places where suffering can still slip through the cracks. Imagine being in that position. Your life, your health, your dignity, all left to the whims of a system that barely sees you as a person. The Estelle v. Gamble case set an important precedent, but it also serves as a chilling reminder that the fight for basic human rights, even in prison, is far from over. The question remains, how many more voices will be ignored before we fully understand what it means to treat people, all people, with the dignity they deserve? This is Courtroom Clarity, bringing you the stories that remind us what justice truly means. Let us know your thoughts in the comments.